In 1938, Superman told the world what a hero looked like: powerful, confident, invulnerable. Captain America reinforced the template: a super soldier built for victory. For decades, that was the formula. Heroes were idealized adults. Teenagers carried their bags. Then in 1962, Marvel introduced a hero who broke every rule. Peter Parker was scrawny, bullied, broke, and riddled with guilt. He should have been forgotten within a year. Instead, he became the most enduring superhero in popular culture, and he's held that grip for over 60 years. The reason begins not with the spider bite, but with everything Marvel had to rethink before it. Stan Lee walked into Timely Comics in 1939, a teenager himself, just as Superman and Captain America were setting the rules for what a hero should be. Those rules were simple. Heroes were adults, larger than life, and nearly flawless. Teenagers, if they showed up at all, were there to look up to someone else, never to lead. But the world outside comics was changing. After World War II, the superhero boom faded. The post-war years brought a wave of suspicion and conservatism, especially after the Comics Code Authority cracked down in 1954. Stories grew safe, predictable, and sanitized. Timely Comics, battered by the downturn, slowly evolved into Marvel, but the formula stayed the same until the early 1960s. Fantastic Four #1 hit shelves in 1961 and did something no one expected. It made superheroes human. The team bickered, failed, and faced everyday worries. Readers responded in droves. Stan Lee, shaped by years of writing for strict editors and a changing audience, began to wonder if people wanted something more honest. What if a hero could be insecure, broke, and unsure of himself? What if superpowers made life messier, not easier? The stage was set for a new kind of hero, one who looked less like a demigod and more like the kid next door. Stan Lee pitched the idea of a teenage superhero to his publisher, Martin Goodman, at a time when teenagers were expected to stay in the background. Goodman rejected it outright. He claimed readers would never accept a hero who was both a teenager and dressed like a spider. But Lee wasn't ready to give up. He waited until the last issue of Amazing Fantasy, a comic already marked for cancellation, and slipped Spider-Man into its pages. That issue, number 15, hit stands in August 1962. The character's look was anything but simple. Jack Kirby, Marvel's powerhouse artist, had once played with a spider-themed hero called the Silver Spider, but his sketches leaned toward the classic, muscular build. When Kirby's approach didn't quite fit the awkward, anxious hero Lee imagined, Steve Ditko took over. Ditko drew a skinny, masked figure in a red and blue costume, with every inch of his face covered and mechanical web shooters hidden at his wrists. The mask gave Peter Parker anonymity, but it also let any reader imagine themselves beneath it. The creative process behind Spider-Man was messy and collaborative. Lee would give a loose plot, Ditko would draw the story, and then Lee would fill in the dialogue, a system known as the Marvel method. The credits blurred. Lee and Ditko both shaped the character, while Kirby's early ideas lingered in the background. Arguments over who deserved the title of creator would stretch for decades, but the result was clear from the start. Amazing Fantasy number 15 sold far better than expected, and by December, The Amazing Spider-Man launched as its own series, with a look and spirit that would prove impossible to erase. A single bite from a radioactive spider changed everything for Peter Parker. Suddenly, the awkward teenager could stick to walls, lift cars, sense danger before it struck. But for Peter, these powers didn't erase the sting of being overlooked or struggling to help Aunt May pay the bills. Fame and fortune seemed closer than ever, and Peter grabbed at them. He donned a mask, performed for crowds, cashed in on TV appearances. The applause drowned out his doubts, until one night, when a burglar dashed past. Peter stepped aside. Catching criminals wasn't his job, he thought. It was someone else's problem. That choice followed him home. The same burglar broke into his house and killed Uncle Ben. The man who raised him was gone, Not because Peter lacked strength, but because he turned away. In the final panel of Amazing Fantasy 15, the words appear, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility." The line isn't spoken by Uncle Ben, but by the narrator, hanging over Peter as he walks into the night. It's not a lesson handed down. It's a burden Peter chooses to carry. From that moment, Spider-Man's story isn't about what he can do, but what he must do. Responsibility becomes his foundation, not a side effect of his powers, but a decision forged from loss, guilt, and the hope that next time he'll do what's right. Peter Parker's story never stopped at the bite or the mask. As the comics continued, Peter moved from high school hallways to college lecture halls, and then into the uncertainty of adulthood. Each new chapter brought a cast of characters who complicated his life in ways no supervillain ever could. J. Jonah Jameson, the blustering editor of the Daily Bugle, turned Spider-Man into a public menace with every headline, fueling suspicion and anxiety about the masked teenager swinging above the city. At school, Flash Thompson bullied Peter relentlessly, never suspecting the quiet kid he mocked was the same Spider-Man he idolized. Harry Osborn became Peter's closest friend, but friendship came with its own dangers, especially as Harry's family secrets began to surface. Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Watson each offered Peter a different kind of hope and heartbreak, making every relationship a risk. Through it all, Peter's double life forced him to juggle homework, rent, and romance while keeping the truth from everyone he cared about. By letting Peter grow up alongside his readers, struggling, changing, and sometimes stumbling, the comics made sure he always felt real. Spider-Man wasn't stuck as a perpetual teenager. He was allowed to grow, and with him, so did his audience. Spider-Man's greatest enemies aren't just obstacles to punch. They're mirrors held up to Peter Parker's fears, guilt, and hopes. Dr. Octopus, with his brilliance and cold ambition, challenges Peter on every level. Both are scientists, both driven by loss, but where Peter clings to empathy, Octavius lets intellect override his conscience. Norman Osborn, the man behind the Green Goblin mask, turns friendship into betrayal. For Peter, Norman isn't just a madman, he's a father figure gone wrong, a warning that the closest people can hurt you most. Kingpin brings crime out of the shadows, forcing Spider-Man to fight corruption that can't be webbed up or outsmarted in a single night. Venom, born from Peter's cast-off anger and Eddie Brock's resentment, becomes a living reminder of what happens when power feeds on bitterness. Carnage goes further, stripping away even the smallest trace of conscience and leaving only chaos. Then there's the Punisher, relentless, violent, convinced that justice is best served cold. Each villain tests Peter's morality, love, and sense of self, proving that the real battle is never just physical. It's a fight for who he chooses to be, every single day. Adulthood arrives for Peter Parker with losses that can't be outrun or patched up with a web. Captain George Stacy, Gwen's father and one of Spider-Man's few allies, dies in a battle with Dr. Octopus. His last words ask Peter to protect Gwen, but grief only deepens the distance between them. The pain isn't limited to supervillains or masked threats. In 1971, Marvel printed a story across Amazing Spider-Man issues 96 to 98, where Harry Osborn, Peter's closest friend, spirals into drug addiction. The Comics Code Authority refused approval, but Marvel published it anyway. The backlash forced the code to change, opening the door for comics to address real-world problems. Then, in 1973, Peter faces a tragedy no power can undo. The Green Goblin throws Gwen Stacy from a bridge. Spider-Man's web catches her, but the sudden stop snaps her neck. The panel is silent. Peter's strength, for once, is useless. The shock ripples through readers and creators alike. Superheroes, it turns out, can fail. They can lose the people they love most. Years later, Kraven's Last Hunt pushes the darkness further. Craven, obsessed with proving himself, buries Spider-Man alive and takes his place. Peter claws his way out, changed. The story lingers on mortality, identity, and the limits of heroism. In these pages, responsibility isn't just a lesson, it's a weight that never lifts. Even the strongest web can't hold the world together forever. Spider-Man didn't stay on the page for long. In 1967, Saturday mornings came alive with the first Spider-Man animated series. Its theme song, catchy, a little goofy, instantly memorable, turned "Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can" into a tune kids and adults could hum without thinking. The series ran for 3 years, but its influence stretched much further. Those swinging cityscapes and web-slinging poses became shorthand for superhero adventure, referenced everywhere from parodies to playgrounds. Soon, Spider-Man leapt into live action. The Electric Company, a PBS show starting in 1974, featured short segments with Spider-Man solving problems in silence, his speech bubbles appearing on screen. These skits introduced the hero to millions of children who might never pick up a comic. At the same time, daily newspaper strips brought Peter Parker's struggles into breakfast nooks across America, while action figures, lunchboxes, and Halloween costumes made him a fixture in toy aisles and closets. Marvel expanded the comics too, launching titles like Spectacular Spider-Man and Web of Spider-Man. No longer confined to a single monthly story, Spider-Man became a constant presence, a shared language. Whether through a TV jingle, a plastic mask, or a comic panel taped to a wall, everyone seemed to know Spider-Man. He wasn't just a character anymore. He was part of the culture, woven into everyday life. Spider-Man's world took a dramatic turn in 1984 with the arrival of a new costume, one that changed more than just his appearance. On the pages of Secret Wars number 8, Peter Parker discovered a sleek black suit on an alien world. At first, it seemed like a simple upgrade. The suit responded to his thoughts, generated its own webbing, and never needed washing. But this was no ordinary costume. It was a living symbiote, an alien organism that bonded with its host, amplifying strengths but also feeding off emotion and willpower. When Spider-Man returned to his regular series, the black suit made its mainline debut in Amazing Spider-Man number 252, instantly dividing fans and hinting at deeper trouble beneath the surface. Peter's new look was more than a fashion statement. The suit made him stronger, faster, and more aggressive. But it also tried to take control, pushing him to act without thinking. Realizing the danger, Peter fought to rid himself of the symbiote. That rejection didn't end the story, it started a new one. The cast-off alien found a new host in Eddie Brock, a disgraced journalist with his own grudge against Spider-Man. Together, they became Venom, a rival with all of Peter's powers and none of his restraint. Venom's full arrival in Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988 created a villain who was as personal as he was terrifying. A simple costume change had given birth to one of Spider-Man's most enduring and complicated foes, showing how even the smallest twist could reshape the entire mythos. Continuity in comics means deciding which stories truly happen to a character and which are quietly forgotten. By the 1990s, Spider-Man's history had grown so tangled that Marvel editors tried a radical experiment: the Clone Saga. From 1994 to 1996, readers faced a question that cut to the heart of Spider-Man's identity. Was Peter Parker the real Spider-Man, or just a copy? Ben Reilly, a clone created years earlier by the villainous Jackal, returned to New York, first as the Scarlet Spider, and then, for a time, as Spider-Man himself. Peter stepped back from heroics, hoping for a normal life with Mary Jane, especially after news of her pregnancy. But that hope was short-lived. In a devastating twist, Peter and Mary Jane's child was taken from them, and the comics world reeled from one reversal after another. 1 month, Ben was the real Peter, The next, Peter was restored as the original. Readers watched their hero's identity and his future shift with every new issue. Frustration grew as the story dragged on, tangled by editorial changes and marketing pressures. For many, the Clone Saga became less about Peter or Ben, and more about whether anyone could truly separate the mantle of Spider-Man from the person beneath the mask. In the end, Peter Parker returned as the one true Spider-Man, but not without a lingering sense of distrust. The experiment had tested not just the character, but the patience and loyalty of everyone who followed his story. Comic book continuity is rarely tidy, and by the late 1990s, Spider-Man's world had become a maze of timelines, clones, and alternate realities. Instead of collapsing under the weight, Marvel leaned into the chaos. Spider-Girl arrived in 1998, starring Mayday Parker, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter, swinging through a future where the torch had been passed. Readers embraced her, and the series ran for an unprecedented 100 issues, proof that Spider-Man could survive, even thrive, beyond Peter Parker himself. Meanwhile, alternate universes multiplied. Some stories reimagined Peter as a noir detective, others as a punk rocker. Each new version asked the same question: what does it mean to be Spider-Man, if anyone could wear the mask? Hollywood watched all this reinvention with growing interest, but turning Spider-Man into a blockbuster proved harder than anyone expected. For decades, studios tried and failed. Some scripts leaned toward horror, others pitched wild new origins. In the early 1990s, James Cameron developed a gritty, rated R take, with Leonardo DiCaprio rumored for the lead. Legal battles, bankruptcies, and creative disagreements kept Spider-Man off the big screen. Marvel's own financial troubles forced the company to sell off film rights in pieces. By 1999, Sony acquired Spider-Man, betting that this tangled, ever-changing hero could finally anchor a movie franchise. The difference between publishing a comic and controlling a film became clear. Whoever held the rights would decide not just how Spider-Man swung through the city, but who he could become. Sony's bet on Spider-Man paid off in 2002, when Sam Raimi's film brought Peter Parker to the big screen with a mix of spectacle and sincerity that hadn't been seen in superhero movies before. Raimi, a lifelong fan of the comics, filled the film with emotional weight and visual flourishes that echoed the original stories. The camera lingered on the small details: Peter's taped-up glasses, the sting of rejection at school, and the quiet moments with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Tobey Maguire's Peter wasn't a wisecracking jock or a brooding action star. He was shy, physically awkward, and completely sincere. His voice cracked. His hopes were fragile. When he lost Uncle Ben, the grief felt raw and unpolished, not just a plot device, but the center of his world. Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn didn't just menace the city. He haunted Peter's personal life, turning every victory into a new kind of loss. The film's version of the origin, from the spider bite to the echo of "with great power comes great responsibility," became the template for a new generation. The story didn't flinch from the cost of heroism. It showed Peter missing out, falling behind, and carrying guilt that never really faded. In 2004, Spider-Man 2 deepened the struggle. Peter's powers faltered as exhaustion and doubt took hold. Juggling jobs, school, and a secret identity, he found himself letting down everyone he cared about. The film gave space to the pain of disappointment, lost friendships, broken promises, and the weight of never being enough. Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina, became both a threat and a mirror, forcing Peter to choose between personal happiness and the endless demands of responsibility. The film's train rescue scene, where New Yorkers rally to protect an unmasked, battered Spider-Man, captured the heart of the character. Someone who keeps trying, even when he's spent. Spider-Man 3 in 2007 tried to take on too much. Studio demands piled on villains: Sandman, a vengeful Harry Osborn, and Venom, the black-suited shadow of Peter's own anger. The story grew tangled, the tone uneven, and the emotional core sometimes got lost in the noise. Behind the scenes, plans for a fourth film unraveled. Raimi and Maguire wanted to continue, but creative differences and missed deadlines ended their run. The trilogy closed with questions unresolved, but the impact was undeniable. Across 3 films, Spider-Man became a global icon, his story of loss, love, and responsibility reaching audiences far beyond comic shops. The mask was familiar, but it was the eyes behind it, uncertain, hopeful, and human, that made Spider-Man unforgettable. Sony didn't wait long to reinvent Spider-Man for a new decade. In 2012, The Amazing Spider-Man hit theaters, pressing reset on the story with a sharper edge and a different emotional pulse. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker wasn't the shy outsider of the past. He was restless, quick-witted, and carried a sarcasm that masked deeper wounds. This Peter skated through school corridors and pushed back at authority, searching for connection but wary of letting anyone in. The heart of his world was Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy, a partner whose intelligence and warmth made her more than just a love interest. Their chemistry lit up the screen, building a relationship that felt both playful and fragile, always shadowed by the risks of Peter's double life. The reboot made a bold choice. It brought Gwen's comic book fate to the forefront. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, her death played out with devastating clarity. The echo of her fall from the comics was unmistakable. Peter's web, desperate and fast, couldn't save her. For many, it was the most haunting moment in any Spider-Man film, a reminder that even heroes can lose the people they love most. The sequel's ambition was matched by its uneven reception. Audiences split over its crowded plot lines and shifting tones, and the planned expansion, films for Venom, Black Cat, and the Sinister Six, never materialized. Hopes of tying this Spider-Man directly into the Avengers faded as well. The Garfield era proved that style and tragedy could refresh the myth, but without a clear emotional anchor, even the most daring reboot could lose its way. The summer of 2015 brought a deal that once seemed impossible. After years of rights battles and failed crossovers, Sony and Marvel reached an agreement. Spider-Man could swing into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, while Sony kept control of his solo adventures. The ink was barely dry when Tom Holland, just 19, stepped into the role, making his surprise debut in the 2016 film Captain America: Civil War. This Peter Parker was younger than any before him, still figuring out high school, and suddenly trading quips with Iron Man and Captain America. There was no need to show the spider bite again, or replay Uncle Ben's murder. The world already knew that story. Instead, the focus shifted. What kind of hero would Peter choose to become in a world already crowded with gods and soldiers? Tony Stark's mentorship offered Peter something new: cutting-edge technology, a suit packed with gadgets, and the validation of an Avengers approval. Yet the gifts came with strings. Peter's victories and failures unfolded under Stark's watchful eye, making each mistake feel larger. In Homecoming and Far From Home, Peter wrestled with the pressure to live up to his mentor's legacy, but also with the risk of losing himself in someone else's shadow. The safety net couldn't last forever. In No Way Home, released in 2021, Peter faced his greatest loss yet. Aunt May, his last family, was killed, her final words echoing the lesson that started it all. With great power comes great responsibility. Desperate to protect those he loved, Peter made the ultimate sacrifice. He asked the world to forget Peter Parker, erasing every friendship, every bond, to keep others safe. No more Stark tech, no more backup. Just one young man in a homemade suit, swinging into the night alone. But Spider-Man's story didn't end with Peter Parker. In 2011, Marvel Comics introduced Miles Morales, a Black and Latino teenager from Brooklyn. Created by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli, Miles took up the webs in an alternate universe after Peter's death. At first, fans were divided, but Miles's journey, struggling with family, identity, and the weight of the mask, proved that the heart of Spider-Man wasn't locked to one face or one background. Peter, now older, became a mentor in Miles's world, helping him learn that responsibility isn't a burden to carry alone. The idea of the Spider-Man mantle as something inheritable exploded onto movie screens in 2018 with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The film's animation pulsed with comic book energy, blending graffiti, pop art, and kinetic action. It brought together spider people from across dimensions, each with their own quirks, losses, and reasons to fight. At the center stood Miles Morales, unsure and scared, but willing to take the leap. By the end, he wasn't just following in Peter's footsteps. He was making the mask his own, showing a new generation that anyone could wear it. The legacy of Spider-Man had become bigger than one teenager from Queens. It belonged to anyone who chose to stand up, face their fears, and do the right thing, no matter the cost. Right now, Spider-Man's mask is more than a symbol, and it's a test. In a world that still rewards power, his story reminds us that responsibility belongs to everyone, not just the extraordinary. Each new Spider-Man, from Peter Parker to Miles Morales, proves that courage isn't about never failing, but about standing up again and again for what's right. That's why the world still believes a hero could be anyone,